name is Dr. Rick Saguil.
And action. Hey, Jay, this is Kirk again.
And action. Hey everyone, it's Dr. Rick, and hopefully you're all doing well without freaking out too much. But I had a question from Patty on whether she or her husband should stop their medicine. The medicine being, well, if this is the first time you're finding me, don't forget to hit the subscribe button down below and take shelter. Especially our older folks, please be careful. I know it's, especially the older folks. I had a patient today that came in. She came in to see me today and had to have her grandma watch, or her mother watch the child. And although mom is young, when we have grandmas that are in their 70s and they're watching the kids, I gotta stop touching my face, darn it. I know it's funny, some of you commented, but you really have to pretend you're a surgeon. You can't touch anything that's close to mucous membrane because you'll feed it. You'll feed the virus that's on your hands into here, or you put the virus that's on your hands into the food you're feeding your kids. So back to what I was saying. Having our elderly watch our kids while we're working or doing our thing or trying to buy toilet paper, you're going to potentially get the kid who could be a carrier to expose the parent or the grandpa who might be susceptible. And I think at this point, everybody's susceptible, but between the kid and the grandpa, kid will do fine, probably. Grandpa won't do fine, probably. So we really have to protect our elderly. And it's so tough. I have a guy that's quadriplegic, has 24-hour nursing care from an old injury. And the staffing told me that we could potentially not be able to get to his house. And what does my quad patient do? I don't know. So we're scrambling to figure this out. They're going to see the downstream effect of what does everybody do? I mean, we're taking shelter. I think most people are listening. That's cool. I saw something in some social media that there's still people going to Florida for vacation and they're congregating. And I tell you, I'm here exposing myself to take care of people, and those people, I'm not sure if it's true, but it just makes, if it's true, I'm really getting pissed off that those people will be the focus of the spread, and I'm doing the best I can, exposing myself. I'm going to turn positive sooner or later, but hopefully I'm not going to have any disease, knock on wood. But anyway, back to what I was talking about. ARBs. Let's just talk about ARBs. So the medicines, if you're on, say, lisinopril, I don't want to break it down into too many of the or get too deep into the weeds, but the group of medicines, let's just talk about it that way. The group of medicines are great for high blood pressure. They're really good for high blood pressure. Low side effects, maybe just cough and ankle swelling, and other benefits, not only lowering blood pressure, but also protecting the kidneys. So these medicines are great. In fact, they have been, it's about 20 years now, but now they're being used not only for high blood pressure, but for normal people with blood pressure, or I should say people with normal blood pressure and diabetes. They help with preserving the kidneys. So these medicines are great. But here's the question that Patty had is, she's been doing her homework, so good job, Patty. Do we get our patients that are on these medicines off of them because of some information from Italy and China? So I had to do my research. And let me just explain a couple things first. This is a cell. So this is a cell. A typical cell has an outer cover called a phospholipid layer. That's essentially, lipid is fat and phospho is phosphorus. So if you phosphorylate a fat molecule, they'll become magnetically charged and they can come together to form a wall, a barrier to keep the DNA really safe. DNA is inside the cell. It's our map or a template for making other cells that are hopefully healthy and human in the future, right? So you have to keep, that's, the prize is right there. You got to keep the prize protected. Now, in the case of the coronavirus theory, not a theory, but I have data, or this is known since SARS, but this virus has a corona around it, or has radiations around it that look like the sun. And these little tiny spikes seem to be attracted to the ACE2 receptor in the cell. Now there's more ACE2 receptors in certain cells, like the lung cell. That's why this thing has an affinity to cause pneumonia. but they're also in the gut cell. So some people, a small smattering of people are presenting with diarrhea. And then the cardiac cell, we're finding that when people get worse, like with this logarithmic increase, they do have heart problems. So if you have an ACE2 receptor in your body somewhere, and you have COVID or the SARS-CoV virus in your body somewhere, it's going to hunt and touch every cell until it finds one with an ACE2 receptor. And I put this little black thing here because this is a blocker. This is where the ARB works. It blocks the receptor. Because if the receptor spot isn't available, it's being blocked, then this COVID virus can't get to affect the cell, if that makes sense. If you take the blocker away and open up the space, then the virus goes right to the receptor, and once the virus touches the receptor, the cell says, oh, it must be a good thing. It has the lock, I'll give it the key. It has the key for my lock, so let it in. And the cell opens up, lets the virus come in, and the RNA in this virus gets released and attacks the DNA, or it takes over the machinery, and it produces no enzymes. It doesn't partition fuel, doesn't produce any proteins. It just produces more RNA. It takes over the cell and zombies it, so it stops its usual function and produces nothing but RNA. And then it erupts or blows up, and essentially, and it releases a whole bunch of new cells to infect more, whether it's more human cells in the one body, or the mucus, the feces, the urine, the saliva, the snot. It gets out to the environment to spread its virus, to spread to more people. So this thing is brilliant. I hate to support it. I'm not supporting it, but once you know about your enemy, you'll be able to fight your enemy. And so this is where the logarithmic, I wanted to show you this graph because, as I mentioned before, in April, I predict that you're going to have a bloom of cases in the next 2 weeks because we're just getting more test kits available. Sherman actually has test kits now. You have to pass the IDPH's questionnaire and call the hotline, but they do have test kits available, and you have to get an approval, and you have to get an appointment. You drive up into the Advocate Sherman in Elgin immediate or emergency room parking lot, and once you're there, you call up and say, I'm here, and somebody comes out, checks your number, and then they swab your nose, and then you get a result in like 3 to 5 days, which is cool. But it's being very selective because we don't have enough test kits. So anyway, you're going to have a bloom, but as you can see, as 0 goes to 10, 10 goes to 20, 40, 80, 100, 60, and then thousands, 10,000s. You're going to see a really fast, that's the way logarithmic math works. It increases exponentially quick. So the problem, not to go off the ARB thing, but the problem is if we can slow this down a little bit, it might help, because we're going to be approaching maximum capacity for the hospital. If we outrun the hospital, it's going to be in Italy all over again and China all over again. If we dampen the curve and stay below the maximum capacity of every hospital around us, you won't overrun the hospitals. If the hospitals don't overrun, you got a fighting chance. Once the hospital system overruns, there has to be something put into place. I'll be pulled out of the clinic to go to the hospital. The hospitalists would be pulled off the floor to go to the ICU. The ICU guys will be overrun. So hopefully we can keep under the curve, but it has, in a long-winded way. The reason I was talking about this was because should we improve the curve by using blockers or not? So those of you who are already on, let's just talk about the ARBs. If you're already on an ARB and you're doing well with blood pressure, or it's protecting your kidneys, I'd say continue. But you have to hear this out. Some people might, if you're just on it for blood pressure and you're not protecting your kidneys, like a insulin-driven diabetic, if there's time, there might be a reason, or might be some legitimacy in switching off of the ARB onto something else, because there are a lot of other blood pressure medicines if it's just a blood pressure issue. So if it's a kidney issue because you have damage from diabetes, can't change it, and you'll be safe. If it's a blood pressure issue and you've been on it for a while, I might suggest changing it, but this is why. At first I said no because I read the European data when Pat asked me, and that's the council with Europe about, they recognize that it could potentially there's a link, but at this point in time, stay the course. Don't get off ACEs and ARBs. So Europe is plus minus as far as doing anything with the medicine. These are just the data points to say that there is an association between the coronavirus and the ACE2 receptor. So they've known that for a while just by animal studies. So you can check out those if you like to read animal studies. And sometimes taking care of destroying that receptor. So the idea would be, hey, why don't we just destroy the receptor and send antibodies to everybody for the ACE2 receptor? Destroy all receptors and there won't be any place for this virus to land. That was a hypothesis in an animal model, but we don't know the side effects of what happens. It did work to decrease I think the severity of the infection, because these viruses, the viruses had no place to go. So it did work, but what's going to happen downstream when you don't have any ACE2 receptors? We don't know. So this was also plus minus, but it did present a nice idea. And when there are nice ideas that are initiated, it's sometimes nice to see. It might lead us somewhere. This is where science is awesome. So there's a couple of things that say, so that would lead to saying it would probably help if we destroyed or blocked the receptor, because if there's no space to go, then the virus can just float around and not really give us a terrible infection. But the other argument is that if you are on an ACE or a blocker, an ARB, let's just talk about ARBs, I want to make it easy. If you're already on an ARB and you block the receptor with your ARB medicine, the theory is that the cell, in reaction to having that medicine on board for 10, 20 years, the cell will make more receptors. That's an argument. So if it makes more receptors and then you suddenly get off your ARB, you'll have massive amounts of open receptors for this RNA virus to attach to. So I think that was what the European guys, the Council of Cardiology, was worried about, is if you reflexly made more receptors because you were blocking them, if you got yourself off of the medicines, you'd have even twice, in theory, twice as many receptors and twice as high of a chance for having severe pulmonary disease, digestive diseases, or heart disease. So that has to be honored in making this decision. Should we pull people off their ARBs or should we keep them on their ARBs? This is data, and these are kind of small studies, but this is data on using the ACE or ARB as a therapy. So again, supporting the fact that if you block the receptor, you might fare better. I think this was also an animal study, if I'm not mistaken. You can look on it yourself. Again, it's only an abstract. And this too, so that's the argument. There's not enough data, bottom line, Pat, there's not enough data to say that the people on ARBs fare better. It's a theory. And there's not enough data to say pull people off the ARBs and substitute with a calcium channel blocker or a beta blocker or a water pill. I think that's fair though. I do it all the time when patients say, I can't tolerate this cough. I was on lisinopril for a while. It's an ACE inhibitor, but ACE inhibitors and ARBs, they're essentially the same family. They can all cause cough and ankle swelling, but ARBs supposedly better. And they both can protect the kidney. But again, pulling yourself off of that and putting yourself on another substitute might be a valid point. The only problem is this. If you're in the midst of pulling off, it's wean down on one, wean up on the other, you potentially can have a spike in your blood pressure, and that increases your chances for having bad outcome with COVID infection. So then the question becomes, how fast? So I didn't do it yesterday, but I support the theory that if we're using ARBs for blood pressure, and we haven't used any others yet, it might seem feasible to switch over to a different blood pressure medicine under my guidance. And how would I do it? I'd slowly get another one on, like a calcium channel blocker. Amlodipine is a common one, or metoprolol for a beta blocker, or hydrochlorothiazide for a water pill. And I'd slowly get that one on, and then watching the blood pressure, I'd take the other one slowly off. Now that takes time, and you got about, I can do it over 2 to 4 weeks. 2 weeks I can do it fast, but you can run the risk of being hypotensive. You'll fall down because you're too low on your blood pressure. 4 weeks I think is fair. But here's the thing. We're blooming in the United States, so we're going to be hitting logarithmic increases very soon. I mean, it logarithmically increases all the time, but after you hit, like, say 10,000, you go 10,000, 100,000, a million, and then it really takes off, and then it goes above max capacity. But if we're still in the blooming phase, and we're not in the surge of symptoms phase, this little window here of a couple weeks, and this logarithmic increase can happen in a day or two. If we're in the right window, I think we can get people off of their ARBs and put them on calcium channel blockers. But again, at the sacrifice, or with the knowledge that if the surge hits and you're kind of mid-foot or mid-step and your blood pressure's spiking, for this theory of ours, you might be actually a higher chance for a flare-up or the problems or death. So, tough decision, and nobody can track how long it's going to be for the spike to occur or the surge to occur. And if we have a side effect of taking one medicine on and taking one medicine off, if we have a side effect, you're going to the hospital. And if you go to the hospital, higher risk. So there's a lot that plays into this. Or worst case scenario, if we drop you off one and start the other too fast, high blood pressure, stroke, heart attack. So there are some problems with this. I think it's a case-by-case basis, but if we're on it, bottom line, an ARB for protecting the kidneys, I'd say stay the course. Take care of your diabetes more so than worry about the receptor concept. If you're on an ARB for blood pressure and it's mild blood pressure and you're relatively young, 40 to 50, might want to contact me. I might want to get you on another one and off the ARB. But again, it's case-by-case basis. So hopefully, Pat, this gives you clarity, but I think I'm still on the fence. However, something is telling me that I'm on the side of the fence that says switch. If we have time, I have no idea if we have time, but things are ramping up. If we do this when there's a surge, no. This doesn't happen when you're in the midst of a critical outbreak. And I really think it's kind of critical now. It's just not symptomatic yet. And I think there's a lot. I think everybody that comes into my office at this point has it, so I have to mask every time. So, we have to assume until I get test kits in this office, I have to assume everybody has it. So, anyway, put some comments down below on what you think about ACEs, ARBs, and this concept with the coronavirus. Otherwise, subscribe, please. I'll try to answer some questions. These are very good questions people are bringing up to me. Next, it will be information on what to do with regards to hydroxychloroquine or chloroquine. I think Trump just said he supported it through his advisors, and I talked about it like 2 weeks ago. So if you don't have your own, I don't know if we can get any more at this point, because I think the pharmacy is going to pull them off the shelf and just dedicate them to the ones in the hospital. So something interesting to read, though, because it works via zinc. So just check out my video on herbal corona, and I'll see you in the next video.